Aloha and welcome to Ehana Kako. We're here every week on the ThinkTech Hawaii broadcast network. I'm Keli'i Akina, president of the Grassroots Institute. It's often said that democracy must have an informed electorate. But if we think about that, there is a lot of information in our society. Turn on the radio, the television, the newspapers, there's information all over the place. So maybe being informed is not really the key to preserving democracy. But the ability to think critically is, the ability to ask the right questions, to understand processes, the ability to explore with our minds and weigh public policies. Boy, wouldn't it be a different world if everyone was able to do that very well, not only our policymakers, but educators as well as students. Well, there is a man whose life has been dedicated to helping people to think critically and to think well. His name is Dr. Thomas Jackson at the University of Hawaii. He's leading a remarkable program in which teachers all across the state are learning how to facilitate the ability to think in the lives of our children. Now, that shouldn't surprise us, but unfortunately, we're often bogged down in the morass of raising test scores or achieving certain metrics. But if we can't really help young people to think, or even get in touch with their capacity to think that is naturally given to them, we can hardly expect them to make good decisions in democracy. Here today with me for a wonderful opportunity to talk a bit about what it is to be a good thinker is Dr. Thomas Jackson. Dr. J.
Hey, aloha, Keli'i. Thanks for having me on the show.
So glad to have you
be here.
You know, our viewers might be interested to know that you are the man who put the hood on my head when I earned a PhD at the University of Hawaii. I'll never forget that.
I won't forget it either. It's a defining moment, isn't it?
But what it really represents is that you've had a very important role in my own education, helping me to become a little more quote-unquote professional, but in the process, I spent most of that time sitting on the floor in your classroom.
Thank you. Never enough chairs.
You have a wonderful course that is beloved at the University of Hawaii called Philosophy for Children. Tell us a little bit about that.
Philosophy for Children is a way of giving people a deeper sense of what it exactly means to do philosophy with children. And we basically do in the course what we do with children. And I think what people love about it is that they get to discover that, hey, I still have a child inside of me. So really, anybody at any age can do philosophy.
Now, isn't philosophy a hard, difficult thing, full of big words like epistemology? So how do we expect children to do philosophy?
I think that the secret to that is that there's two branches of philosophy. One that's well known, I call it Big P philosophy.
All right.
That's the academic version, and it has these kinds of very important sounding and important areas and so on.
That's Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Kant, and so forth.
Those are the dudes.
Big P.
I call those the Ers, the philosophers.
All right.
Right. And then there's this other branch that we're working on, and I call that little p.
Okay.
And little p is grounded in the idea we're all born with wonder. You've been around a little kid, wonder. And Plato said that's where philosophy starts.
So philosophy is this process in which we encounter things that cause us to wonder, and we keep wondering and wondering.
Exactly, exactly.
So children then, I would suspect children are born innately with that capacity.
They are. They are. And sometimes it helps just to have a couple of quick examples, like a kindergartner asking in a circle, what do you wonder about? And this young fellow says, the other day, while I was gazing at the stars, I was wondering whether anything came before space.
Oh,
wow.
That's a pretty deep question.
That's deep.
That could be theological, or it could be on the cutting edge of science. It could be science fiction.
All of the above, all of the above. And if I can tell you where the kids took it, because this is about young people taking it where they want to go. One of the first thoughts was dinosaurs.
Okay.
Right?
That's way back there.
That's way back. Dinosaurs are a long time ago. So then I asked the kids, well, you know, because I didn't know, and in this, we don't know the answer. Nobody knows the answer. We want to go a little more deeply into it. I said, you know, boys and girls, help me understand, what's the connection between space and dinosaurs? And it was thoughtful for a moment, and then one of the kids says, they really need a lot of space. So there was a, there was a chuckle, and I thought, that's right. Then there was some more, and I like to say silence, because they're not feeling in a rush. And finally, one of the kids said, you know, maybe God came before space.
You're giving our viewers a glimpse into a process that takes place in your campus classroom there in the Department of Philosophy almost every day when you teach this course, where you have teachers, you have future philosophers, you have lawyers, you have a broad range of people who come in and try to get back in touch with what they knew how to do when they were children.
Exactly, exactly. And that's part of the joy of it, I think, for them. And you know, what happens very often to people in that course is they remember something that many, many years ago they were asking, and they finally let go of. Example, in one of the classes, a teacher said, you know, with other teachers, I have a question that I stopped asking, and she remembered in 3rd grade, because people said, oh, that's kind of a dumb question. What do you mean, you don't know the answer to that? So she said, could I ask that question again? We were saying, well, yes, yes. Now you can see the wounding around that.
Yes,
she
that's
said,
right.
You know, I don't know. You sure you won't laugh? You sure you won't laugh? And we, no, of course, what's the question? She said, okay, here it is. Now don't laugh. And she was deadly serious now. Don't laugh. She said, how far is up?
How far is up?
Yes. And then she said, you know, now I know in a way, if I get on an elevator, and I used to think about this as a kid, we'd get up to the 33rd floor and we would get off. But I used to think, what would happen if the elevator kept going? And we went out and we went past the moon, would I still be going up? And how far would I have to go before not going up anymore? And we're all just, you know, wow, wow, you've got some very good company.
The movement that you lead across the world as one of the key proponents is called Philosophy for Children. In a nutshell, how would you define that term, which many of us call P4C?
I would say, first caution is that it's done in lots of places in the world. And in different places in the world, as is appropriate, people are manifesting it in ways that they see appropriate to their context. What I think, in a nutshell, it brings together two things that most people don't associate together. That is philosophy and children. Most people don't think about, they think about philosophy as an academic. Certainly you are not doing that to children. And so it has them, in a sense, it's an invitation, well, what could that be? And I think, wow, we've just popped out of the essential stereotypes, and they're trying to figure out. Now, if you ask a parent, do you have any little children? Do you think they're philosophers? Oh, yeah, let me tell you what my child asked me the other day. Then they're on to it. So I think the first starting point for philosophy with children, for children, is in a way the reverse of what people would think if you want to find about real philosophy. As a parent, for instance, listen to the questions that your children are asking you and don't feel the pressure to answer it.
I hear you saying that there's this capacity that children have, and you're suggesting, I would suspect, that somehow gets lost or covered up or goes defunct as we grow older and older and older. So part of the process of actually doing philosophy well is to get back to that innate process that children know.
Precisely, precisely.
A less polite way of putting it is that we're educated out of it as we go through school.
I think that's a painful, direct way to put it. When I first started this work, one of the most disheartening things was to work in a school where I would be in a day, K through 6, and to watch systematically the drop in that sense of wonder, such that by 3rd grade, it was more and more, okay, they're not interested in my questions anymore. It's like, what's the answer? What's the answer?
Now, from a pragmatic point of view, and when I say pragmatic, I mean in terms of the system that establishes educational institutions, we see the opposite. We see that a child from kindergarten through 6th grade is learning more stuff year after year, things that can be measured on tests. There is a lot of data that's being stuffed into
That's
their
right.
heads, a lot of values that we're imparting to them and so forth. But you're saying, though, that their capacity to think is not growing during that period of time. It's actually going the other way.
I think that's exactly right. They're learning a narrower bandwidth of think. And this is all across the different disciplines. And I've been to conferences where they've talked with mathematicians, they've talked about students are not learning to think mathematically. A professor from Berkeley, one of the top tier schools, said, as long as my students can come in and figure out the algorithm to apply to this, they're very clever at that. But if they can't find the algorithm, they're lost. They don't know what to do.
You mean the given rule that provides them somewhat of a formula that they could plug things into? If we haven't just given that to them, they don't know where to begin.
Exactly. You know, one of the standards that was in Mad Magazine once was if A can mow a lawn in 3 hours and B can mow a lawn in 2 hours, right? Now their take on that was, how long would it take a real person to mow the lawn? So if you haven't memorized that formula, you don't recognize the pattern in the problem, then you have no idea what to do. No idea what to do. And similarly now in science, I was at a conference in Taiwan and they were saying, you know, we have, and it was a woman, the equivalent of the National Science Foundation in Taiwan, she said, we have brilliant students, but we don't innovate. Because again, they've been trapped in this box of, how do I answer the question on this test? What's the formula I need? What do I need to memorize?
Now, I understand that P4C helps young thinkers and old thinkers alike to access certain tools that recapture the sense of wonder, that allow us to raise the kinds of questions that are needed to raise in order to be really thinking about something, and that there's a community that grows around this. We're going to get into that a little bit, but how do you compare this process to what we generally see in our educational system from K through 12 and then college here in the United States?
I think that there are two essential elements, and one of the things is the shift in the power relationship between the teacher and his or her students. And so it's still very much a top-down, teacher is the fount of the knowledge and information that you need to learn, and the students are the receptors of this information. So there's very little of questioning coming back, very little opportunity for the teacher then to really confront his or her thinking, because they know by and large what the answers are.
Well, so that's the essence of it. The teachers have the answer.
That's right.
Students have the question, and there's this sense that the answer is more important. Giving the right answer is the ultimate goal. But what you're suggesting is it's the other way around,
That's
actually.
right.
The question is almost more important.
That's right. And there is, I think, a very important thing that we call a Good Thinker's Toolkit. And the Good Thinker's Toolkit has basically 7 letters, and I would say each of those letters is a way of posing a new question to that answer.
So instead of saying, here's the problem, and the answer is such, and you're successful if you get the answer, P4C says, here's a box of tools, questions, use them. Show us how you can ask more questions.
Exactly, exactly.
What are those 7 letters?
Well, and for instance, take a question, one of them, and you can use them in any mix, in any combination, one of them just is, what does this question assume?
Okay.
What does it assume? And that's sort of a disruption of the train that's headed towards an answer, because it's like, wait a minute, yeah, what does it assume? And then when you tease that out, then another tool letter is T. Is this true, this assumption that we're making? Another's the letter I. What are the implications of this? If it's true, what follows? If it's not true, what follows? E letter. Is there any evidence to support this assumption? R letter. Do we have any reasons to accept this assumption? And the W letter, what do they mean by this anyway? So when I think of issues that are out there in the world now, and monster topics, for instance, take sovereignty.
All right.
Okay? What do we mean by sovereignty? And I think oftentimes people are just talking past each other. They have certain assumptions that they bring to this, what it ought to be, but they haven't really had what we call an intellectually safe community where they're not taking sides in this, but they're going to genuinely, as we say, think together. Back off of us doesn't mean we reject them. It just means, what would the world look like if I take on a different set of assumptions?
And that's just the first of several questions that a young person learns to ask in order to begin the process of understanding? Well, when we come back after a short break, we'll go on to the other 6.
Good.
WRAITEC.
Sounds
you see,
good.
I earned my grade in your course. We're with Dr. Thomas Jackson, one of the most beloved professors at the University of Hawaii, who teaches not only children to think, but teaches professors of professors how to impart the practice of thinking. I'm going to ask him not only to explain the program that he leads at the university, but also to talk a bit about how critical thinking can impact our public policy world. We'll be right back after this short message.
Hi, my name's Hillary Weinberg. I'm the host of The Whole Gamut on ThinkTech Hawaii. See us live every Tuesday at 1 p.m. or on our YouTube channel to hear us talk about world affairs from Hawaii and beyond. See you then.
Hi, I'm your host on ThinkTech Asia, Bill Sharp. I look forward to you joining us each Monday between 4 and 5 o'clock when we film right here in our studio in downtown Honolulu. The show, ThinkTech Asia, focuses on contemporary events in Asia. And by Asia, we mean anything from Hawaii, south to Australia and New Zealand, west to Pakistan, and as far north as the Russian Far East. Clearly, this is one of the most economically dynamic centers of the world. And we bring you up to date on what's going on in a whole host of countries in this very vital region. We look forward to seeing you. Aloha.
Welcome back to the second portion of today's program. I'm Keli'i Akina with the Grassroot Institute here on ThinkTech Hawaii. We love to say e hana kako at the Grassroot Institute. Why? Well, you know that old saying, e pule kako, let's pray together? That's venerable and it's respected. It's also true that we should e hana kako, which means let's work together. Let's work together to build a better economy, better government, better society. Think of the terrible alternative, saying that we won't work together. Well, that's not going to help us in our society. And one of the things that we love about ThinkTech Hawaii is that it's bringing together resources, people, in order to work together. Jay Fidel and the crew here do a wonderful job of producing about 35 hours of original content from Honolulu every week. You can find it at thinktechhawaii.com. Now back to Professor Thomas Jackson of the Uhiro Center for Ethics and
I can help you on
and
that one.
education. That's right, philosophy and ethics and education at the University of Hawaii. I just call it P4C, philosophy for children.
Much easier, much
Sure
easier,
is.
yeah.
You know,
yeah.
you introduced us a bit in the last segment to a toolbox of 7 questions that help us to think correctly and to get the process of thinking going. But that whole approach implies that questioning is as valuable as answers and sometimes even more valuable.
Yes. What I want to just back up the tape a little bit, and it's not about thinking correctly.
There you go.
You know, it's about, I like the metaphor of thinking more deeply, of not just simply taking information as it comes to us, taking it, assuming that it has some kind of authority immediately, but to just hit the pause button, and I think that's our philosophical wonder button. And when you hit that wonder button, then this array of tools that are in the toolkit are available. Here's a question that was asked by my grandson a couple of years ago, and you'll see, I think, why I think it's important that the answers are not so important as the questions, but children ask us questions that I think that disrupt the flow. My grandson said to me, "Grandpa, could Santa die?" Now, children, I call them, they're disruptors. I mean, so I thought, Bramlin, my grandson, I got to think about this, and let's talk about it tomorrow. It's time for bedtime, right? So the next morning, I went to the first graders, and I said, "Boys and girls, I need your help." And I really meant, I need your help. So it's genuine, because I'd never thought about, could Santa die? What would that mean? So first child said, "Well, yeah, Santa could die." Now I want to know, then what? He said, "Well, Santa and Mrs. Claus have kids." And if it's a boy baby, that baby grows up to be, you guessed it, the new Santa. If it's a girl baby, she grows up to be the new Santa. Now that's not all. Your body knows when it's in the coldest place on the planet. So when Mrs. Claus has kids, they're born with white hair. Now, the very next child to speak, and this is part of the beauty of this, said, you know, I don't know, I think it's your parents. I think it's our parents. How come? And they talked about that for a bit. And then this little girl says, and I'm saying little now in a very guarded way, because young people, we have these amazing ideas. She said, I don't think Santa's that guy in the red suit. I think Santa's a spirit. Santa's the spirit of kindness. And if kindness went out of the world, it gives me chicken skin to tell the story, if kindness went out of the world, then Santa would die. Now,
Incredible.
you know, yes, and so that's what I think, rediscovering within ourselves this sense of wonder, and then I call it gently Socratic inquiry, because the toolkit letters are not about engaging somebody in some kind of argument. That about the Western model of philosophy, I think it's basically argument positions. This is much more, I feel, local, Asian, Hawaiian, Polynesian. We're not in competition with each other. You said it's ehana kako?
Yes.
I think that's a perfect way of describing our inquiry community. Let's think together.
Well, and that's what you described in that little model. Children thinking together. It was safe.
That's right.
They weren't going to be, no one was going to be knocked down for saying anything.
Precisely.
They were engaged for that reason. And they were collaborative with one another.
That's
and
right.
They came up with wonderful questions about
right.
Santa.
That's right.
And they are along the lines of your toolbox questions. Like,
Exactly.
what is Santa? What are the reasons? What assumptions are being made? What implications are there? How true is this?
Exactly.
And is there an example and a counterexample? You know, just before I ask you to tell us a little bit more about the tools, I was thinking when you asked the question, can Santa die? It's taken public policymakers to come up with a very long time to come up with a certain axiom today in public policy. If it can't go on forever, it must stop. And we're trying to help them apply that to taxes or to other expenditures and so forth. These children naturally would know where to take that.
They would, and I think if they didn't, they would know what to do. Because our work is also about creating a different culture in a classroom where it is intellectually safe. As long as you're respectful of others in that community, you can ask any question, pose any point of view. You can say it's our parents. You can say whatever it is, and we're not trying to persuade people. What they're getting is, geez, in this circle of people whom I care deeply about, peers, I'm realizing that there's a really rich array of points of view, and oftentimes it's like, I realize I'm not alone. There's somebody else that also has this point of view, and so now collectively together, we want to think together. And those children, for instance, in that first grade class, they internalize the toolkit. They'll think about, is that true? Is it our parents? And they asked, and they're not articulating, well, give me evidence. No, they're wanting to think more deeply. It was, well, reason, why do you say that? And he said, well, I looked at the package and I recognized my parents' writing on it. And someone else said, yeah, but you know, if you were Santa, why bring presents to a house where the parents have already taken care of it? So, and it's not like, you know, again, it's not like they're trying to compete for things. So at the end of a session, it's like, sometimes kids will say, wow, my head is spinning. This is really great, isn't it?
That's right.
Yeah.
It's tempting for those who are not initiated in the process to think that the wonder that you're expressing in the conversation of the children is a bit naive. But for those of us who've had the opportunity to sit there in those circles, and I'm grateful that you've given me that opportunity, to watch children or to watch individuals all the way up through college age and beyond employ the process, that wonder grows as a skill and capacity.
That's right.
So
That's
it's
right.
not naive at all.
No,
in fact, the
right.
naivete may be part of the wonder.
Precisely.
But these questions can be used in very sophisticated ways if the approach to education from year to year to year is one that nurtures the sense of wonder and the ability to use questions.
That's right. And you know, as you were saying that, I'm thinking about really great recognized people in history who wondered the big wonders. How come women don't have the right to vote?
Mm-hmm.
Martin
Great
Luther
question.
King, you know, I have a dream. Any number of things where people still have the sense of wonder, which is, I think, at a deep level, to see the world otherwise than as it is and presents itself. Nelson Mandela, you know, what are we going to do now to heal our country? And so we're going to have truth commissions. So wonder, I think, is not, it's childlike, but I want to say when I'm thinking philosophy and as we think about it, and children, that we all are born with wonder, and to the extent that that wonder is still alive, that childlike nature is still there in varying degrees. In my work, what has heightened my optimism is that it's not a matter of age. You've mentioned in my class, I get lots of different age groups and age levels, but different, you know, I've worked with older people in the age sense, and their sense of wonder is still extraordinarily vibrant. So I think it's the challenge across the life cycle to keep that sense of wonder alive, and the courage, I think, that goes with that wonder, and the wonder that's, it's unsettling. I think that's part of the problem with the people who are the dreamers in a way. It's unsettling to people the longer they've gone without contacting within themselves this wonder. That disturbs things. And so political things about, I mean, sometimes people will talk, you know, they'll look at the Jones Act and they'll think, why can't we do something about the Jones Act? And some folks they're so, in a way, fixed in a particular mindset that their wondering maybe limits their capacity. It's not either or.
That's right.
Can't we can reconfigure.
And the emphasis on helping questions to be asked takes us away from being locked into preset answers.
Precisely.
You mentioned, for example, the Jones Act, a public policy issue. I've seen that many people who are committed one way or the other, pro or con, adopted their position very early on in their political lives,
right,
or their ideology lives and so forth. And so they've been spending their time defending an answer that perhaps has changed, or perhaps the environment has changed, and it's no longer the answer in this environment. Instead, you're helping young people and educators to gain a sense of being able to ask the right questions as we move forward.
Right, exactly. You know, I read, my view of Socrates was impacted greatly by a woman by the name of Hannah Arendt. Most people are not, but you may, you know, and she covered the Eichmann trial, the banality of evil. Well, she wrote a book about, in this book, Life of the Mind, she talked about Socrates, and she said, you know, I don't know what he was like, but here's what I would want him to be like if he were to have my admiration. Now, what Socrates, most of us, she said, as adults, and I love the metaphor, have minds that are filled with, she called them frozen thoughts. They're frozen thoughts.
That's right.
And so what Socrates did was to take people who, with their frozen thoughts, and to bring a sort of almost a blowtorch. I think that was part of the problem. But she gives an example. And you can do this with children, you know. What's a chair? And they'll talk about it. You know, it's a concept. Oh, okay, it has 4 legs, it has a back on it, da-da-da-da-da. And then, does it have to have a back to still be a chair? Does it have to have a cushion? And they really, it's frolic, it's play. But you take a toughie, like, what's justice? And what Socrates did was what the little kids do again. But why? Why do you think that? And so he, in a way, he began to melt those frozen thoughts, and people get really uneasy. You know, the ice is starting to get thin. I'm feeling threatened. And so he persisted and persisted, and unfortunately, his style wasn't the most gentle, but I think he felt he had to philosophize with a hammer, as Nietzsche put it.
That's right.
To shake people. I read a very interesting article about young children And they're very like Socrates in their playful way. But why? And a parent gives a response that they memorize. But why? And again, but why? And they're not, I think we misunderstand too often. They're not fixed yet in a particular narrative. And they genuinely want to know. So here I'm thinking for the parent, if you can, in a way, let go of the defensiveness that you develop because your questions weren't answered, and with your child, just from them, a question is an invitation to an inquiry.
That's right. And to use some of the tools in your box.
Precisely.
That wonderment of why, when you have the tools, helps children to ask questions that let them explore more and more.
Precisely.
Instead of taking something just as a given, children will ask, what's the reason behind it?
Right.
What's the assumption behind it? What's the implication behind it? They may not know those terms, and those are part of the tools, but they're saying, why? Why? And there's that hope that when we open that door, we'll find something, and then there'll be another door to open, and so forth. Raytech, 7 questions.
7 questions.
I have to tell you before I ask you to explain each of these questions that when I started to teach courses in college, I faced a real problem, plagiarism. And those 7 questions helped me to deal with that. We have to take a break now, but I'll come back and explain that in just a moment. We're having a delightful conversation with Thomas Jackson of the University of Hawaii about an approach to education called P for C, Philosophy for Children. We're going to talk a little bit more about what that is, and then I'm going to dive into some questions about how it might be applied to our school system as a means of revitalizing education in America. Don't go away. We'll be right back after this.
Aloha, my name is Kaui Lucas. I am the host of Hawaii is My Mainland, here every Friday on ThinkTech Hawaii at 3 p.m. I invite people who are doing interesting and inspiring things in our community to help us keep it local and keep it real. Tune in any Friday, 3 p.m. and also available on our YouTube channel and my blog, kauilucas.com. Hawaii is my mainland. Aloha.
Aloha! How you doing? It's me, Angus McTech, asking you to come join us on ThinkTech Hawaii Hibachi Talk. Join me and my 2 hosts, Gordo the Tech Czar and Ender the Security Guy, every Friday from 12:45 till 13:45. See you on Fridays, and remember, let your wing gang free wherever you be.
Welcome back to the final segment of today's Ehana Kako program on ThinkTech Hawaii's broadcast network. I'm here with Dr. Thomas Jackson at the University of Hawaii, talking about P for C, or Philosophy for Children, and believe that this is not only a great approach in our schools, it can be something that could be applied throughout society. Dr. Jackson, I was just telling you that I learned, probably as you yourself learned, that students are tempted to cheat.
Right.
And I wanted to deal with that in the least obstructive way to the learning process. Then I realized that students have tremendous access to data today.
Right.
On their cell phones, their computers and so forth. There are essays that are pre-written, and the information is there. So I decided to pass a rule during my exams. And it was, they're open book, they're open computer.
Good for you.
You can have all the information in the world.
Good for you.
Because I'm not testing whether or not you can acquire data.
Yes.
Or whether you can
Yes.
download information.
Right.
So feel free, it's out there, you can have it all your life. But what really confounded them is I said, but you have to show me that you can ask 7 kinds of questions.
Oh, I love it.
So instead of an essay question like, what were the forms of Plato, for which you could find numerous pre-written essays and so forth, they had to show that they could ask questions about it. And those questions were the 7 Raytech questions. These are the tools in the toolkit. And frankly, it just frustrated the students to no end, many of them, because they had not yet learned how to ask the right questions. They had always learned that it's about getting the right answers.
Yes.
So we changed the rules of the game. And this has become a very, very rewarding part of teaching now to see students start to ask the right questions and get very, not right questions, but the process of questioning, and get very excited about that. What are those 7 questions that we take from, well, you never told me this, but I've always guessed they come from the elenchus of Socrates, his process of what we call Socratic questioning.
They came, actually, it wasn't from Socrates.
All right.
It came from I saw a paper once about philosophy for children, and someone said that they had taken a few letters because a big question was, how do we know we did philosophy in this session? Okay?
There you go.
And you can't say metaphysics, epistemology. No, that was not.
But you have to satisfy the bill payers.
But you have to find the bill payers. So he had several letters, and he had, an R. Well, now the kids didn't do this, but the people looking at it afterwards would say, were they giving reasons? Were they giving examples?
Okay.
Some of those letters. So when I got back to Hawaii, teachers were, one of the big conundrums was, how do you know those questions to ask? What do you guys philosophers do?
They needed a rubric.
They needed a rubric, yes, they needed a rubric. Little did I know. So as I thought about it, I thought, wow, that's what, and I think all of us do when we're using the philosophical part of who we are.
Sure.
And so none of the letters seem strange to people.
So what are each of these?
So let's start.
W-R-A-I-T-E-C.
So like W. And W stands for this category of, well, what do you mean by that?
All right.
What do I mean by that?
And we can go deep, because
And
what
we can go
defines
really,
something?
That's right. Or someone says, I'm leaving.
All right.
What do you mean by leaving? In a relationship,
So a lot of the traditional who, what, when, where, how, and so forth fits within a what kind of question?
Yeah, I'll say for
At the
convenience
front
sake,
end.
sure,
Yeah.
at the front end, sure.
Just
What is the meaning of this?
Okay.
How did it come about could extend out of that. So the next one is
R.
Reason.
Reason.
Can you give a reason or ask for a reason? A reason why?
Why?
And then the next iteration of that is that a good reason?
Mm-hmm.
And now the W doubles into that. What do you mean by a good reason?
All right.
Okay, so now they're starting to work together. The next letter is the letter A, and the letter A is assume.
All right.
What are we assuming?
But aren't we always told assuming is a bad thing to do?
That's, one of the unfortunate
That's right.
pieces of misinformation that's out loose. I think it's a beef I have with quick fix workshops where teachers have been told, oh, assumes, those are bad things to do. I think, where did you get that from? Because we use them every day.
That's right. Is there anything about which we don't make assumptions?
Exactly. I think that the crucial distinction, 2 of them, one of them is it conscious or unconscious? This assumption that I'm making.
So the student asking the question identifies an assumption and then asks, is it conscious or unconscious?
Yes. And
that's a lot of deep thinking right there.
That's very deep. You've already gone
a lot of
deeper.
So W-R-A.
A. And then the other thing on that, is it safe to assume?
All right.
So I see somebody, they have a particular configuration, I find something in my mind, I'm assuming, oh, you must be homeless.
All right.
And now the next letter is the T.
Or the I.
Or, yeah, that's right, I. And now after a while, it's sort of
melded
together. So
they're not
I
really
is next.
separate.
Yeah. So if that assumption is true, then what? What are the implications of that?
If then.
If
what a powerful
then.
way of thinking.
Yeah.
Because to all the thens, there's there's cause and effect.
Exactly. And what if assume, okay, so the if then, the first part is often assume. What if we modify the Jones Act? For instance, to go back to that example, if we modify it, then what? And then we can ask, does that follow?
That's right.
Always, never, or sometimes.
Do we want what follows?
Do we want what follows? And if we don't want that, is there something else? So now we've sort of pulled ourselves back from answering to a whole new realm of possibilities.
The next letter, I'll let you say what it is. It's a T, but I was told when I began to use that in a Sunday school class that I should not use that question. The letter T.
Do you know?
True.
True. And
How
I think
true is it?
Is an unfortunate thing about that is that truth is a really powerful tool given the sorts of things that children are exposed to.
That's right.
So we want them to be equipped with, don't immediately jump to, is it true or not, but how could I find out?
Right.
How could I find out? What does this truth rest upon? So children, you know, with philosophy for children, there's never been someone who has been dismayed, you know, who comes from, you know, a particular religious persuasion. Because this is about deepening your understanding of your own faith.
And it also asks, when is it true and when is it not true?
Exactly, exactly.
E, example,
E.
and C, counterexample.
And it's grown to two E's now.
Okay.
One is, can you give me an example?
Evidence.
And evidence. Can you produce evidence for whatever it is that you're saying? And then C is for counterexample. And counterexample is, I have found, maybe other people in the audience, you'll have found out there, that always or never shows up. You always da-da-da-da-da. You never da-da-da-da-da-da. Now, if it's with a significant other, you have to be really delicate with this, but can you think of a counterexample? Your room is always a mess, or you never are on time. Now, a counterexample just means there's this one little, and they probably have lots of examples.
There we go.
Legions of examples, but just that one counterexample is enough to soften the blow. Maybe it's mostly.
Well, this has been so rich, you know? We haven't even left time to get answers to all the questions we're raising.
Oh, no.
As we close up our program today, but how delightful to think that people can raise these kinds of questions and go further and further and further, and to conceive of education. So very quickly as we close here, how would you envision this would transform education in America if we were raising up children to become adults who asked more and more questions?
I think that it's a vision that sometimes it's so inspiring. Mm-hmm. And having seen it in large groups and see how those groups are transformed, elementary, middle, high school, universities. I mentioned that the HSTA and our academy had a work session at the campus center where we brought from widely different walks of life together to think about ethnicity and inequality in public education today. Keynote speakers, and then they asked, from this, what the speakers said, each person was invited to write down a question, and then meet around these 10 different groups, and you guys vote on what question do you want to talk about together.
So even to say this is the question we will pursue, right, is part of the democratic community that we would create.
That's right.
We'll have to do this again and go
Let's
even
do it
further.
Again.
I want to say to our viewers today, Dr. Thomas Jackson raises profound questions, and the process of questioning. I imagine, what would it be like if instead of walking into the public policy arena, we come with our Democrat or Republican or Libertarian or Independent or Union or non-union or religious or non-religious and so forth label, and instead walked in and said, yes, we represent diversity, we represent different communities, but let's start asking the right questions about the future and about possibility. Boy, that would be fun. Perhaps a philosophy for legislators.
That's right. And the operant word is fun.
Fun, absolutely. Thanks for being with us today. I'm Keli'i Akina with the Grassroots Institute. My guest, Thomas Jackson of the University of Hawaii, advocate for P for C, Philosophy for Children. Aloha from ThinkTech Hawaii's broadcast network. Until next week, bye-bye.